I'm divorcing you because my mistress is pregnant with a boy. A defective product that can't bear a son should get out. Mistress, you mean that woman? I pointed at the woman next to Samuel. She retorted with displeasure. I'm not just any woman. I'm Natalie. How rude of you. Exactly. That's why I'm dumping her, Samuel said, and both he and Natalie laughed. I was taken aback. How could they talk so openly about having a mistress? Normally, that's something you'd hide, and now they're joking about divorcing because the mistress is pregnant. There's a limit to how much one can endure. Does he have any idea how much I've been putting up with? Well, this divorce actually works out in my favor. I have plenty of evidence, and he's admitted to the affair. I'll gladly dump such a husband in exchange for a hefty alimony. I'll make sure he hits rock bottom, so he better brace himself. Clenching my back teeth, I headed to my room. My name is Michelle Brown. I'm a 43-year-old stay-at-home mom raising 4 daughters. My eldest is 11, and the second one is 9, so they can handle most things by themselves. But the youngest 2 are 5-year-old twins who still require a lot of care. I keep reminding myself that this phase of constant caregiving is only temporary. Thinking this way makes me cherish these precious days even more. You might think we have a happy family life from this conversation, but that's far from the truth. My parents-in-law, who live with us, are constantly critical of me, and my husband Samuel hardly ever comes home. Our marital and family relations are terrible, to say the least. Samuel is probably cheating on someone out there. I've even hired a private investigator to track his activities. But the girls need their father, and with that thought, it seems impossible to just get a divorce. The frustration inside me keeps growing. I feel that if we weren't living with my parents-in-law, things might not have turned out this way. It's something I regret, but at the time there was nothing I could do. Samuel and I met through a mutual acquaintance. Back then, I was working as a hairdresser at my mother's salon and was close with a lady named Anna from the neighborhood. There's a man around your age at my favorite jewelry store. Anna started telling me about Samuel Brown, the heir to a jewelry business, an elite graduate. He was too busy with work to meet women. Why don't you meet him? Someone like me and an elite like him. We're not a match. Just meeting should be fine, she insisted. Eventually, I couldn't refuse and agreed to meet Samuel. Surprisingly, we hit it off. I was impressed by his fondness for children and his smart, elite demeanor. That's how we started dating with marriage in mind. Later, when Samuel proposed, I accepted. However, when I went to Samuel's parents' house to announce our marriage, his father said to me, "Our family runs a business. Both my wife and I are busy, so we need a daughter-in-law who can handle household chores. I've been living with my mother, and I do all the housework." Hearing this, my mother-in-law's demeanor changed. "Oh, if you're good at housework, why don't we live together? It'll be convenient for both of us, right?" I was taken aback. I couldn't understand how it would be convenient for anyone but them. Before I knew it, the decision to live together was made. I regretted it, but it was too late to change anything. Samuel seemed to agree with the arrangement. I thought, once things settle down, I can bring up living separately. Samuel will be on my side, right? I compromised with these thoughts. That was a big mistake. As soon as we got married, my mother-in-law dumped all the household chores on me. "Michelle, I have to go to work, so please take care of the cleaning and laundry." Yes, my mother-in-law was technically an employee at her husband's company, but it was just for show. She shoved the housework onto me and went off to enjoy herself. The atmosphere at home never allowed for a conversation about living separately. I sighed resignedly. I could tolerate being burdened with household chores, especially since Samuel's income was good and I became a stay-at-home mom after our marriage. So I diligently took care of the housework, though I grumbled about it. However, one day my father-in-law made a request. "We're in a bind because one of the part-timers can't make it. Can you help out at the jewelry store?" His company, which dealt in jewelry sales, had both wholesale operations and retail stores. Basically, he was telling me to work as a salesperson at one of these stores. I was displeased, but living with him made it hard to refuse without worsening the atmosphere at home. Reluctantly, I agreed to help out. This turned out to be my second big mistake. Once my father-in-law saw I was willing to help, he repeatedly asked me to assist with the company's work. I had missed my chance to refuse and ended up doing whatever he asked. Honestly, I had even considered divorce. Then I discovered I was pregnant. When I shared the news with my parents-in-law, they were overjoyed, throwing their hands up in the air. Fantastic, fantastic, Michelle. From now on, your health comes first. You don't have to do any housework or work, okay? Ah, yes, right. I need to inform the relatives, my father-in-law said, frantically contacting relatives. Watching this with a smile, Samuel spoke to me. Sorry about this. Dad and Mom are just excited. No, it's fine. I'm happy they're happy. Good. Just focus on delivering a healthy baby. Samuel's words were the most encouraging. From that day, my life changed drastically. The household chores, which had been thrust upon me, were now taken over by my mother-in-law. I was treated like a princess with everything done for me. My father-in-law didn't ask for help with work anymore. Looks like I can have a peaceful childbirth now. Relieved, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl a few months later. However, when my in-laws came to see the baby, their faces fell. Anxiously, I showed them the baby. Look, a healthy baby girl. I've named her Catherine. Oh, I see. That's a nice name. My mother-in-law was visibly disappointed, and my father-in-law's reaction was the same. Well, they say first a girl, then a boy. So you should have a boy next time. Yes, I was confused. After my in-laws left, I asked Samuel about their strange behavior. Your parents were acting weird. What happened? Probably because it was a girl, Samuel said, looking disappointed. He explained that his family had been running the company since his grandfather's time. As it was a family business, they needed a male heir. So my parents-in-law were hoping for a boy. In other words, they were disappointed it wasn't a boy. Well, just make sure the next one is a boy, Samuel said with a sullen expression. I was infuriated. Was he implying a girl couldn't be an heir? That's not true. A girl can work too. In fact, for a jewelry business, a girl might even be more advantageous. What is wrong with these people? I found myself wanting a divorce immediately, but I couldn't leave because of Catherine. At least until she grows up, I'll endure it. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned home. My life reverted back to what it was before pregnancy. Every day I was burdened with both household chores and work, and now I had to take care of Catherine as well. I lived each day gritting my teeth. Eventually, I became pregnant again, but it was another girl. I named her Christina, but neither my parents-in-law nor Samuel showed any interest. A few years later, I got pregnant for the third time, only to find out it was twin girls. Predictably, my parents-in-law and Samuel showed no interest. Worse, they continued to dump housework on me even after I gave birth to the twins. Nothing changed. I seriously started considering divorce. During this time, Samuel and I argued over our daughter's education. It's fine to leave girls alone. They don't need much education. Nowadays, girls need to study too, aiming for university. What? As long as a woman looks good, she can get married. No need for studies. Samuel and I fought like this every day. Naturally, things between us kept getting worse. Eventually, Samuel started spending more nights away from home. He must be cheating, I thought, and anger welled up inside me. Enduring this isn't good for my health. I visited a detective agency nearby and requested an investigation into Samuel's behavior. It'll take a few weeks for the results. They said I needed to prepare for everything. First, I talked to my daughters. Your father and I might not be able to get along anymore. The younger ones seemed not to understand, but Catherine and Christina appeared to grasp the situation. I'm okay with it. I don't like Dad anyway. Yeah, Dad's always angry. I don't like him either. It seems my daughters have taken after me. This meant I could bring up divorce when the time was right. I felt relieved. Then one Sunday morning, someone visited our house early. Wondering who it could be, I saw Samuel bringing in a guest. Michelle, we need to talk, Samuel said. He brought a young woman with him. She wore flashy makeup and was smiling oddly. Since you couldn't produce an heir, I went out and found a woman who can, Samuel announced. A woman who can produce an heir? I thought it was just an affair. I watched as Samuel caressed the woman's belly and declared, well, that's the situation. In that moment, everything became clear to me. Samuel continued smirking. I'm divorcing you because my mistress is pregnant with a boy. A defective product that can't bear a son should get out. Mistress. You mean that woman? I pointed at the woman next to Samuel. I'm not just any woman. I'm Natalie. How rude of you. She retorted with displeasure. Exactly. That's why I'm dumping her, Samuel said. Both he and Natalie laughed. I was taken aback. How could they so brazenly talk about having a mistress? Normally, that's something you'd hide. And now they're joking about divorcing because the mistress is pregnant. There's a limit to how much one can endure. Does he have any idea how much I've been putting up with? Well, this divorce actually works out in my favor. I have plenty of evidence, and he's admitted to the affair. I'll gladly dump such a husband in exchange for a hefty alimony. I'll make sure he hits rock bottom, so he better brace himself. Clenching my back teeth, I headed to my room. My gaze fell upon my 4 daughters standing in front of the room. I pulled them close and whispered, I couldn't make up with your father. Don't cry, Mom. We're here for you, Catherine consoled me. I hugged my 4 daughters tightly. Then we began preparing to move. I contacted a moving company and called my mother. Hey, Mom, about the other day. You couldn't make it work, could you? She gently asked. I had told her when I requested the investigation that I suspected Samuel was cheating and I might get a divorce. Yeah. Well, then it's going to be tough from here. Come back home immediately. I'm getting everything ready. Thank you, Mom. After that, I moved back to my childhood home with my 4 daughters. Although I had been worried, the girls didn't seem downhearted. In fact, they were even excited about going to their grandmother's house. However, that wasn't the end of it. There were still matters of child support and alimony to be resolved. Back at my parents' house, I could resume working as a hairstylist, but realistically, I needed child support to make ends meet. I hoped Samuel would agree to a reasonable settlement. That was my only concern. After moving, I started discussions with Samuel about alimony, but as expected, we were at an impasse. You're divorcing me because I cheated. You couldn't have a son. That's why. I did nothing wrong, Samuel said defiantly. Does he not see his affair as wrong? His childish attitude was exasperating. Months went by without any resolution, and Samuel barely answered my calls anymore. Do I have to go to his company? I wondered. Just then, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Samuel. Michelle, can you talk right now? After all this time avoiding me, now you want to talk? How convenient for you. How convenient for you? I snapped back, irritated. Samuel fell silent, realizing I might lose this chance. I continued, hoping he wouldn't hang up. So, what did you want to talk about? Well, would you consider remarrying me? I thought I had misheard him, so I asked again. Did you just say remarry? You're joking, right? I'm not joking. Things are just terrible now. Samuel seemed really down. Despite the hassle, I asked why. He then began his story. A few days before the phone call, Samuel's parents had called him at work, saying Natalie was about to give birth. Thinking a long-awaited son was about to be born, Samuel rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, Natalie had already given birth. However, Samuel's parents were in a state of shock outside the delivery room. Samuel asked the doctor about Natalie and was told the birth was successful. Confused, he went to see the baby. Upon reaching the newborn nursery, a nurse pointed out his child. At that moment, Samuel said he turned pale. The baby was clearly not his. What? But if the baby was just born, it's hard to tell such things, I began, but Samuel interrupted loudly. The baby had pale skin and blonde hair. It seemed the child clearly had completely different features than mine. Figures, I found myself replying. Samuel snapped back, irritated. What do you mean, figures? Before you brought up divorce, I had an investigation done on you. An investigation? Samuel raised his voice in surprise. Yes, I also had your affair partner, Natalie, checked out too. She had other close male acquaintances, including some of European background, I said mockingly. Could one of them be the real father? I thought she was only with me. You believe that? That's laughable. Why would a young woman be satisfied with an older man? I laughed loudly. Infuriated, Samuel yelled, Shut up! Don't laugh. Ignoring him, I laughed heartily and then broached the subject of child support and alimony. Regarding the child support and alimony, Shut up! I said, I want to remarry, and I refuse, he shouted even louder. If you don't want to remarry, then you raise this baby. That's the condition for paying alimony and child support. What an absurd thing for him to say. I was dumbfounded and couldn't even respond. He took the opportunity to hang up, cutting off the call. From then on, I couldn't get through to him anymore. If you won't answer the phone, we can't discuss anything. I don't want to see him, but I have no choice but to go to his office, I muttered as I pocketed my smartphone. I headed downstairs to the beauty salon where Anna, one of our clients, was waiting. My mother was attending to another customer nearby. I approached Anna with a business smile. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's okay. More importantly, I'm sorry for any trouble caused by that matter, Anna said, carefully avoiding mentioning Samuel's name. No, it's fine. Just having some issues with the alimony. Are you really okay? Anna looked at me with concern. I masked my feelings with a forced laugh. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong, so it seems he has no intention of apologizing. That's tough. It would cause him an uproar online, but I don't plan to blow things up that much, I answered with a laugh. Then I noticed my mother's customer eavesdropping. If bad rumors spread, maybe that's for the best, I thought. Pretending to be oblivious, I started working. Eventually, my mother's other customer left. After a while, Anna spoke up. Michelle, were you okay with not warning that customer just now? Apparently, she had noticed the eavesdropping too. If bad rumors spread, it might teach him a lesson, I replied with a smile. Soon, I finished Anna's haircut and let my mother take over while I retreated to the back. Later, I tried calling Samuel, but he didn't answer. A few days later, on a day the salon was closed, I went to Samuel's company. He wasn't there and was reportedly at the retail store. Reluctantly, I headed to the retail location. As soon as I entered the store, I heard a familiar voice. Oh, what brings you here? I looked up to see my mother-in-law standing at the counter. It's been a while. Coming all the way here. What an indecent woman you are, she retorted, though her strong words belied a somewhat haggard appearance. It seemed the revelation about Natalie's child not being Samuel's had affected her greatly. I smirked and addressed her. Can't help it, can I? Since he keeps running away. What did you say? I asked, my voice firm. I just want to be compensated. How do you plan to take responsibility? My words caused a stir among the customers in the store. Realizing the situation, my mother-in-law started to panic. Stop this right here, please. But money can settle this, right? That's better for everyone, isn't it? I said, deliberately provoking her. The atmosphere grew tense as the onlookers began to murmur. Unable to bear it, My mother-in-law pulled my hand and led me to the back of the store. There Samuel was working. She called out to him, "Samuel, you have a visitor." Samuel looked up, and the moment our eyes met, he looked flustered. "Michelle, I had to come myself since you were ignoring me so much." "No, I wasn't ignoring. Samuel stammered, clearly flustered. I couldn't help but laugh. "So, about the child support and alimony, what's your plan?" "Well, you can afford it, right? Future company president." I teased. Samuel seemed to give up, slumping in defeat. "All right, I get it. I'll pay." This marked the beginning of our discussion about child support and alimony. The calculations were already completed. All that was left was for Samuel to sign an agreement. He had been avoiding this because he was still fixated on remarrying me. My presence here was to utterly dismiss any notion of us getting back together. I watched, almost amused, as Samuel signed the papers. As I left, I was approached by someone. Turning, I saw Natalie standing there, her clothes tattered, a far cry from how she looked that day. "It's been a while. What happened to you?" "You look a mess," I said almost teasingly. Natalie bristled at my words. "It's your fault because you wouldn't take the baby." Natalie had been kicked out by Samuel because I refused to take care of her child. Now she was blaming me for her plight, not understanding she brought this upon herself. I didn't want to be the one receiving her complaints, so I diverted her attention. "Don't blame me. Why don't you just ask Samuel for alimony?" "But Samuel is angry because he found out that my child isn't his," Natalie said, looking downcast. I smirked. "I'm sure he'll listen to you now." He was in a good mood considering he listened to me. Of course, this was a lie, but if Natalie went into the store, it would surely cause a scene. Following our earlier exchange, this would lead to more trouble, and Samuel's company's reputation would plummet. That's what I was thinking. "Really? Then I'll go," Natalie decided and walked into the store. I watched her go and then walked away. I didn't check what happened, but that night, the local news reported a woman causing a scene at the store. That'll teach her a lesson, I thought smugly. However, a few days later, things took an unexpected turn. I was preparing to open my shop when the phone rang. "Thank you for calling. Is this for a reservation?" I assumed it was a customer and replied with the usual phrase, but on the other end of the line, amidst the noise of people, I heard the voice of my mother-in-law. "It's not a reservation. What have you done?" Are you Samuel's mother?" I asked, taken aback. Her voice grew louder. "It's your doing, isn't it? Right now, people are swarming the store." "What are you saying? The store is popular." "No, they're all here to cancel their orders." Suddenly, the call ended amid a burst of loud voices. I was baffled. Reluctantly, after informing my mother, I headed to Samuel's company store. As I approached the store, I saw a massive crowd. Samuel and our parents-in-law were trying to calm the gathered people. Soon, my mother-in-law spotted me. At that moment, she raised her voice loudly. "What are you going to do about this? What's happening here? There are rumors of bankruptcy, and it's all your fault." I was clueless, having no idea what she meant, so I asked her to explain everything from the beginning. Here's what she told me. On the day I visited the store, a customer had come in, purchased some jewelry, but then started insisting on canceling it. My mother-in-law, who hadn't yet ordered the product, readily agreed to the cancellation. However, the number of customers wanting to cancel gradually increased, eventually leading to a crowd. Hearing this, something clicked in my mind. I decided not to mention my suspicion, but to ask the reason instead. "Why did this happen?" "Some rumors on the internet are saying it's dangerous." As we spoke, the crowd pushed me away, separating me from Samuel and his mother. Eventually, I had to leave the scene. It was only a few days later that I learned the full story. Here's what happened. The catalyst was a conversation at my beauty salon. On that day, a client overheard my conversation with Anna. That person anonymously posted online. There's a dispute over alimony involving the son of a jewelry company president. They probably thought it was safe to post anonymously. Initially, that alone wasn't a problem. However, a few days later, I had a public argument with my mother-in-law at the store. Someone who saw this wrote a similar post online. There's a commotion at a certain jewelry store, something about alimony. The final straw was Natali's incident making the news. After that, it was easy to identify the company and store. As expected, they were identified, and rumors started circulating that the store was in trouble. The rumors led to the company being on the brink of bankruptcy, with customers rushing to cancel their orders. It was like the old-fashioned bank runs. Anyway, the company that faced a slew of cancellations did go bankrupt. Samuel and our parents-in-law ended up with debts. They lost their assets and now are living a life of part-time jobs. This situation made me worry about whether I would receive child support and alimony. I sometimes thought I should have taken the child support and alimony in a lump sum, but I can live quietly with my 4 daughters. I think that alone is sufficient for happiness. It goes without saying that my daughters are more important than money.
The laughter and chatter around the table were abruptly cut short, replaced by a stunned silence that seemed to amplify the sound of beer dripping from my hair onto the floor. Tristan, my husband, stood opposite me, the empty beer can still in his hand, a smug grin fading from his face as he realized the gravity of what he'd just done. "Meredith, I swear, it was just a joke." Tristan tried to defend himself, but the stern look on his father, Douglas's face, suggested this was no laughing matter. "A joke?" I echoed, my voice steady but seething with anger. "Is this what our marriage has come to? Your idea of fun?" "Eliza, calm down," Meredith interjected, her tone dismissive, as if soaking your wife in beer was a trivial matter. "Boys will be boys." "That's enough!" Douglas's voice boomed, slicing through the tension like a knife. "Tristan, apologize to Eliza, now." Tristan's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I thought I married, a man capable of respect, of love. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a scowl directed not at me, but at his father. "I'm sorry, Eliza," he mumbled, the words empty, devoid of sincerity. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the incident laying bare the fractures within our family. Once, I had been a confident, independent woman, but now, living under Meredith and Douglas's roof, I felt like a shadow of my former self, trapped in a cycle of disrespect and enabling behavior. As the evening wore on, the incident with Tristan was glossed over, but the damage lingered, a stark reminder of the growing gulf between us. It wasn't just about the beer or the humiliation. It was about respect, about partnership. And as I lay in bed that night, beside a man who felt more like a stranger with each passing day, I wondered how we had gotten here, how I had allowed myself to become so lost. Douglas's reprimand of Tristan was a small spark in the darkness, a sign that not all was lost, that perhaps there was still hope for change. But as I drifted off to sleep, the laughter and mockery echoing in my mind, I realized that hope was a fragile thing, easily extinguished by the harsh reality of our lives. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Douglas and Meredith arguing in hushed tones in the kitchen. "He needs to grow up, Meredith. We can't keep coddling him." Douglas insisted. "He's our son, Douglas." "He's just going through a rough patch," Meredith countered, her voice laced with the same denial that had enabled Tristan's behavior for years. Listening to them, I felt a surge of determination. This was not the life I had envisioned for myself, not the partnership I had signed up for. It was time to make a change, to find my way back to the strong, independent woman I once was. But as I stood at the crossroads of my life, the path forward uncertain, I knew it would not be easy. The bonds of family, of marriage, were not easily broken, and the journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges. Yet, in that moment, as I resolved to reclaim my life, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me, a spark that would, in time, become a blazing fire. The morning after the beer incident was like waking up to the aftermath of a storm. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the usual hum of activity. As I made my way to the kitchen, The memory of last night's humiliation clung to me like a second skin. But today, I refused to let it define me. I found Meredith at the stove, her back turned to me, the air around her thick with the scent of brewing coffee. "Good morning," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Without turning, Meredith replied, "Coffee's almost ready." Her tone was neutral, as if last night had never happened. I poured myself a cup, the silence between us stretching uncomfortably. It was then Tristan walked in, his eyes barely meeting mine as he mumbled a good morning. The tension was palpable, a silent battle of wills taking place in the heart of our home. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make them see how their actions were tearing us apart. But I knew it would only fall on deaf ears. "Eliza, about last night," Tristan began, his voice trailing off as he searched for the right words. I cut him off, my patience worn thin. "Save it, Tristan. Your apologies mean nothing if your actions don't change." Meredith finally turned, her gaze sharp. "Eliza, don't talk to your husband that way. He's trying to apologize." Her words stung, a painful reminder of the chasm between us. An apology doesn't undo the disrespect, Meredith. Or do you think it's acceptable for a husband to treat his wife like that? Meredith's lips tightened into a thin line, her silence speaking volumes. The conversation was cut short by Douglas's entrance. His disapproving glance at Tristan was a small comfort, a sign that not everyone was blind to the injustices unfolding within these walls. Breakfast passed in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. It was a silence that screamed of broken bonds and unspoken resentments. The rest of the day passed in a blur of chores and strained interactions. It was during these moments of solitude that I allowed myself to reflect on my journey to this point. Once I had been full of dreams and ambitions, a young girl with the world at her feet. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the role of the dutiful wife, my dreams sidelined by the needs of others. It was in these moments of reflection that the seeds of resentment began to grow, watered by the constant belittlement and disregard from Tristan and Meredith. Their words, meant to cut deep, only fueled my resolve to reclaim my independence, to prove that I was more than just an extension of their expectations. The day ended as it had begun, with a heavy silence hanging over the house. As I lay in bed next to Tristan, the distance between us felt insurmountable. I realized that the man lying next to me was a stranger, his once endearing quirks now sources of endless frustration. It was clear that something had to change. I could no longer continue living in the shadow of the person I used to be. The humiliation and disrespect had reached a boiling point, and I knew that if I didn't take action, I would be consumed by the bitterness that threatened to overwhelm me. As the night gave way to the early hours of the morning, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan to break free from the chains of this toxic environment, to take back control of my life. It was a daunting task, one that would require all the strength and determination I could muster. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew it was the only way forward. The path to redemption was fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on, ready to fight for the future I deserved. The days that followed were a testament to the growing divide within our household. My role had shifted subtly yet significantly from partner to caretaker, not just of the home but increasingly of Douglas, whose health had begun to falter. This new responsibility was not one I shied away from. If anything, it provided a sense of purpose amidst the chaos. "Douglas, you need to eat something," I urged gently, presenting a plate of food to him. His once robust frame had become frail, a shadow of the man who had once commanded respect without uttering a word. "I'm not hungry, Eliza, but thank you," he replied, his voice weak but laced with gratitude. As I cared for Douglas, the criticism from Tristan and Meredith intensified, their barbs more pointed and frequent. "You're smothering him," Tristan would snap, watching with a critical eye as I helped his father navigate the stairs or take his medication. Meredith was no kinder. "You act like you're the only one who cares about him," she accused, her words dripping with disdain as she observed my attempts to make Douglas comfortable. Their cruelty was unrelenting, but my resolve to stand my ground did not waver. Amidst their contempt, a bond had formed between Douglas and me, forged in the quiet moments of care and understanding. It was during these times that Douglas would share stories of Tristan's childhood, painting a picture of a boy who had never faced consequences, his every whim indulged by Meredith's unwavering defense. "It wasn't always like this," Douglas confided one afternoon, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "But we let things go too far. Meredith couldn't bear to see him upset." I listened, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, explaining the man Tristan had become. Despite the harsh reality of our situation, I found solace in Douglas's company, his wisdom a guiding light in the darkness that had enveloped our home. The tension reached a boiling point one evening when a simple misunderstanding turned into a full-blown confrontation. In my haste to prepare dinner while attending to Douglas, I accidentally knocked over a glass of wine, staining the tablecloth Meredith cherished. "That's irreplaceable!" Meredith shrieked, her face contorted with rage as she surveyed the damage. "It was an accident, Meredith. I'll clean it up," I offered, reaching for a cloth, but Tristan blocked my path. "No, let her see what her carelessness has cost," he sneered, his voice cold and unforgiving. The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words and pent-up frustration. Douglas attempted to mediate, his voice a calming presence amidst the storm. "It's just a tablecloth. Let's not let this ruin our evening." But his words were like a match to kindling, igniting a firestorm of accusations and blame that left no one unscathed. Tristan and Meredith stood united in their disdain, their words cutting deeper than any physical wound could. That night, as I lay awake, the events of the evening replaying in my mind, I realized that my presence in this house was not just a burden to them. It was a mirror, reflecting their own failings and insecurities. The hostility I faced was a testament to their inability to confront the truth about themselves and their son. The bond I shared with Douglas, however, offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. His appreciation for my care was a balm to the wounds inflicted by Tristan and Meredith's cruelty. It was this connection that sustained me, a reminder that kindness and understanding could still flourish even in the most toxic environments. As the days passed, my determination to rise above the hostility only grew stronger. The path ahead was fraught with obstacles, but I was no longer the woman who had walked into this house, meek and compliant. The fire within me had been ignited, fueled by injustice and cruelty, and I was ready to fight back, to claim the respect and dignity that was rightfully mine. The simmering discontent had reached its boiling point, and I knew that the time for action was drawing near. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier with each passing day, a storm cloud ready to burst. Despite the constant tension, I continued to navigate the choppy waters of our household dynamics, my resolve to maintain peace never waning. But as hard as I tried, the balance I sought seemed ever out of reach, the scales tipped too far by Tristan and Meredith's antagonism. It was during a particularly fraught dinner that the delicate balance we'd managed to uphold came crashing down. I had spent the afternoon preparing a meal, hoping to bring some semblance of normalcy to our fractured family. But as fate would have it, a simple mishap would serve as the catalyst for the evening's downfall. As I carried the dish to the table, my foot caught on the edge of the rug, sending me stumbling forward. The meal I had labored over landed in a heap on the floor, my efforts wasted. "Clumsy as ever," Tristan remarked with a sneer, his words cutting through the silence that followed my fall. Meredith's laughter echoed his contempt, her gaze upon me void of sympathy. "You can't do anything right, can you?" Douglas, ever the peacemaker, rose to my defense. "It was an accident. Eliza, are you all right?" But his concern was drowned out by the cacophony of blame and mockery from Tristan and Meredith. Their harsh words felt like physical blows, each one a reminder of the precarious position I held within this family. As I cleaned up the mess, the weight of their disdain pressing down on me, I couldn't help but wonder how much more I could endure. The incident at dinner was not an isolated one. It was a symptom of a much larger issue, a manifestation of the disrespect and malice that had become all too common. In the days that followed, Douglas attempted to mediate the growing rift between us. "We need to find a way to live together in peace," he pleaded, his voice weary from the constant conflict. But his efforts were met with resistance. Tristan and Meredith, united in their disdain for me, refused to see the part they played in the household's discord. Their blame was always directed outward, never inward. The tension reached a boiling point one evening when Tristan's cruelty took on a new form. Returning home late, he barged into the living room where I sat reading, his eyes alight with malice. "I suppose you've been lounging around all day, while the rest of us work," he accused, his words laced with venom. "I've been taking care of your father," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger boiling within me. Tristan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. "My father doesn't need a nursemaid. He needs a family that doesn't include a freeloader." The insult stung, a bitter reminder of how low Tristan's opinion of me had sunk, but it also ignited a spark of defiance within me, a determination to no longer accept his abuse in silence. "Maybe if you showed a fraction of the concern for your father that I do, you'd understand the meaning of family," I shot back, my words a reflection of the frustration and hurt I had kept bottled up for too long. Tristan's response was a glare filled with hatred, a silent promise of further conflict. But in that moment I realized that I no longer feared his anger. The scales had tipped, and with them, my tolerance for the indignities I had suffered at the hands of Tristan and Meredith. As I went to bed that night, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The precarious balance we had maintained had been shattered, the pieces too scattered to ever be put back together. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and confrontation. But one thing was clear. I could no longer stand idly by while Tristan and Meredith sought to diminish me. The time had come to take a stand, to fight back against the injustice that had become my daily reality. The battle lines were drawn, and though the road ahead was daunting, I was ready. Ready to reclaim my dignity, to assert my worth, and to fight for the respect I deserved. The storm that had been brewing was about to break, and I was no longer afraid to face it head-on. The days melded into one another, each bringing its own set of challenges and confrontations. But nothing could have prepared me for the events that would ultimately serve as the catalyst for my transformation. It began like any other day, with the morning light creeping through the curtains and the house stirring to life. But the air was charged with a tension that hinted at the storm on the horizon. Breakfast was a silent affair, the clinking of cutlery against plates, the only sound breaking the uneasy quiet. Tristan and Meredith exchanged glances, their silent communication a language I had grown all too familiar with. Douglas, sensing the brewing storm, cast me a worried look, his concern a balm to my frayed nerves. It was not until later that morning that the dam finally broke. Tristan, emboldened by whatever grievance he had concocted in his mind, launched into an unprovoked tirade against me. "This is all your fault," he bellowed, his finger pointed accusingly in my direction. "You've turned my own parents against me." His words were absurd, a distortion of reality that bore no truth, but they were spoken with a conviction that belied their falsehood. "I've done nothing but support you and your family," I countered, my voice firm despite the shaking of my hands. "Support? You call this support?" Tristan's laugh was bitter, filled with contempt. "You've done nothing but bring discord into this house." Meredith, ever Tristan's ally, nodded in agreement. "You've overstayed your welcome, Eliza. It's time you realized that." The words were a slap in the face, a stark reminder of my precarious position within this family. But it was Douglas's response that marked the turning point. "Enough!" His voice, though weakened by illness, carried the weight of authority it once had. "Tristan, your behavior is unacceptable. Apologize to Eliza now." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Tristan, faced with his father's rare admonishment, faltered. His face flushed with anger, he stormed out of the room, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot. In the aftermath of Tristan's outburst, the reality of my situation became painfully clear. The family I had tried so hard to support, to be a part of, was irrevocably broken. And I, caught in the middle, had become the scapegoat for their frustrations and failings. Douglas's attempt to defend me, though heartening, was a stark reminder of the divisions that had formed. His words, though intended to mend, only served to widen the chasm between us. As I retreated to the sanctuary of my room, the events of the morning replaying in my mind, a resolve began to take shape. The humiliation and disrespect I had endured could no longer be brushed aside. It was time to take a stand, to fight back against the injustice that had become a constant in my life. The decision to leave, to extricate myself from this toxic environment was not made lightly. But as I packed my belongings, each item a reminder of the life I had hoped to build here, I knew it was the only way forward. The confrontation with Tristan, the culmination of years of tension and resentment, was the last straw. It had shattered any illusions of reconciliation, of finding a place within this family. My path, once entwined with theirs, had diverged, leading me away from the pain and toward a future of my own making. As I closed the door behind me, the weight of my decision pressing down on me, I felt not sorrow, but a sense of liberation. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them. Ready to reclaim my independence, to forge a new path based on respect and dignity. The chapter of my life entangled with Tristan and his family had come to a close, but as I stepped into the unknown, I did so with a newfound strength and determination. The battle may have been lost, but the war was far from over, and I, Eliza, was ready to fight for the life I deserved. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked away from the house that had been my prison for too long. The darkness seemed less daunting than the life I was leaving behind. My steps were uncertain, yet driven by a force stronger than fear, the desire for freedom and a fresh start. As I navigated the quiet streets, my phone vibrated in my pocket, pulling me back to the reality I was trying to escape. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize, but the content left no room for doubt about the sender. Running away won't solve your problems, Eliza. You'll regret this. Tristan's words, even in text form, dripped with venom and the promise of retaliation. I quickened my pace, the threat igniting a spark of defiance within me. Tristan's attempts to intimidate me, to drag me back into the mire of his making, would not sway my resolve. I was done being a victim of his cruelty. The following day, the repercussions of my departure became apparent. News of Tristan's latest escapade, a drunken brawl at a local bar, spread through our small community like wildfire. The incident, which ended with his arrest, was the talk of the town, a public humiliation that laid bare the depths of his recklessness. I learned of the incident through hushed conversations at the cafe where I sought refuge, the whispers of the patrons a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. "Did you hear about Tristan? Completely lost it last night. They had to call the police," one woman said, her voice laced with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. The news, while shocking, was not surprising. Tristan's self-destructive behavior was a path he had chosen long ago, each act of defiance against decency and responsibility leading him inevitably to this point. But it was Douglas's reaction, conveyed to me through a brief, heart-wrenching phone call, that struck the deepest chord. "Eliza, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to come to this," he said, his voice a reflection of his shattered hopes for his son. The conversation was brief, the pain and disappointment palpable even through the phone line. Douglas's acknowledgement of Tristan's failings and his apology to me was a bittersweet vindication of my decision to leave. The fallout from Tristan's actions was swift and severe. His arrest and the subsequent legal troubles served as a form of instant karma, a reckoning for years of unchecked behavior. But while part of me felt vindicated, another part ached for Douglas, who bore the brunt of his son's disgrace. In the days that followed, my resolve to start anew was tested. The temptation to return, to offer support to Douglas in his time of need, was a constant battle. But I knew that going back would mean surrendering the hard-won ground I had gained in my fight for independence. As I struggled with my conscience, a chance encounter provided the clarity I needed. A former colleague, unaware of my personal turmoil, reached out with an opportunity that promised not just a new career, but a fresh start in a new city. The offer was a lifeline, a chance to escape the shadows of the past and build a future on my own terms. It was the sign I had been waiting for, the confirmation that my decision to leave was not just right, but necessary. With a heart heavy with mixed emotions, but a spirit buoyed by the prospect of a new beginning, I made my choice. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but it was mine to walk, free from the chains of a toxic marriage and the specter of Tristan's downfall. As I packed my bags, ready to embark on this new journey, I realized that the night of repercussions was not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. The drama and revenge that had marked my days with Tristan were behind me now, replaced by a sense of hope and the promise of redemption. The road ahead was long, and the wounds of the past would take time to heal. But as I stepped into the dawn of a new day, I did so with the knowledge that I was no longer defined by the failures of others. I was Eliza, strong, independent, and free at last. The new city welcomed me with open arms, its bustling streets and vibrant energy, a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. Here, in this place of new beginnings, I found the strength to rebuild, to carve out a space for myself that was untouched by the shadow of my past. But even as I embraced this fresh start, the specter of unfinished business loomed over me, a reminder that true freedom required confronting the demons I had fled. It was during this period of renewal that I received an unexpected call, one that would set the stage for the final act of my departure from Tristan's life. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet fraught with a desperation I had never heard before. "Eliza, it's Meredith. You need to come back. Tristan's in trouble, and he needs you." Her plea, laced with manipulation, was a tactic I had grown all too familiar with. "I'm not coming back, Meredith. Tristan's problems are his own making. He needs to face the consequences of his actions," I replied, my voice steady, a reflection of my newfound resolve. "But he's your husband." Meredith's voice cracked, the veneer of control giving way to panic. "He was my husband. That's in the past now." With those words, I ended the call, cutting the final thread that tied me to the life I once shared with Tristan. The news of Tristan's legal troubles had not gone unnoticed by me. His actions, once merely reckless, had spiraled into criminality, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. It was a path that could only end in ruin, and I refused to be dragged down with him. In the wake of my decision, I took proactive steps to protect myself and ensure that Tristan would be held accountable for his actions. With the help of a skilled attorney, I began to compile evidence of Tristan's misdeeds, documents, and testimonies that painted a damning picture of the man I had once vowed to stand by. The process was grueling, a dredging up of memories I had fought hard to bury. But with each piece of evidence I gathered, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a sense of empowerment that came from taking control of my narrative. As the case against Tristan began to take shape, an unlikely ally emerged. Douglas, disillusioned by his son's behavior and Meredith's denial, reached out to me with an offer of support. "Eliza, I can't undo the past, but I want to help make things right," he said, his voice heavy with regret. Douglas's support was a turning point, a sign that justice, though long delayed, was finally within reach. Together, we presented a united front, a testament to the fact that Tristan's actions could no longer be swept under the rug. The legal battle that ensued was a public spectacle, a fall from grace that stripped Tristan of his ability to harm those around him. The evidence we had gathered was irrefutable, leading to a conviction that would see Tristan facing the consequences of his actions for years to come. As I stood outside the courthouse, the final verdict ringing in my ears, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the ordeal was over, and sorrow for the family that had been irrevocably broken by one man's selfishness. The journey to this point had been fraught with pain and hardship. But as I looked to the future, I did so with a heart unburdened by the past. The revenge I had sought was not one of malice, but of justice, a reclaiming of my dignity and a declaration that I would no longer be a victim. The turning point had come and gone, leaving in its wake a path to a new life, one filled with hope and the promise of healing. And as I walked away from the courthouse that day, I knew that the next chapter of my story would be written on my terms, free from the shadows of yesterday. The courtroom's heavy doors closed behind me with a finality that echoed through my very core. The legal battle was over, and with it, a chapter of my life that had been marked by struggle and pain. The city around me bustled with life, indifferent to the monumental shift that had just occurred within those courtroom walls. Yet, for me, the world seemed different now, colored by the promise of new beginnings and the sweet, hard-won taste of freedom. In the days that followed, I found myself walking the streets of my new city with a lighter step, each day unwrapping itself like a gift. The job that had once seemed like a mere escape now flourished into a promising career. my efforts acknowledged, and my talents nurtured. It was in this environment of support and respect that I rediscovered my passion and purpose, the dark cloud of my past slowly receding into the background. But it wasn't just my professional life that had undergone a transformation. The solitude that had once been my constant companion was gradually replaced by a network of friends and colleagues, relationships built on mutual respect and shared experiences. It was during one such gathering, a casual dinner with friends, that I met Alex. Alex's entrance into my life was unassuming, a slow burn that gradually evolved into something deep and meaningful. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, a dance of words and laughter that filled the spaces in my heart I hadn't realized were empty. With Alex, I found not just love, but a partnership built on trust, understanding, and an unwavering support that I had once thought impossible to find. As my relationship with Alex grew, so too did my sense of self. The insecurities and fears that had once held sway over me began to fade, replaced by a confidence and strength that I wore like a mantle. I was no longer the woman who had walked away from Tristan and his toxic influence. I was someone new, someone reborn from the ashes of my past. Yet, even as I embraced this new chapter, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The fight for justice against Tristan had been arduous, a battle that had tested my limits and forced me to confront the darkest parts of my soul. But it was a battle I had won, not just in the courtroom, but within myself. The karmic justice that had befallen Tristan was a distant memory, a chapter closed and locked away. Meredith's attempts to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had formed between us, were met with polite indifference. The family I had once longed to be a part of was now just a footnote in my story, a reminder of the trials I had overcome. As for Douglas, our relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect and understanding. His support during the trial had been a beacon of hope, a reminder that not all was lost in the wake of Tristan's destruction. We remained in contact, a tentative connection that served as a testament to our shared history and the resilience of the human spirit. The new dawn that had risen on the horizon of my life was bright with possibility, its light casting long shadows over the remnants of my past. I had emerged from the crucible of my experiences a stronger, more resilient person, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the city sprawling before me, I realized that this was not just a new chapter, but a whole new book waiting to be written. My story, once defined by drama and revenge, was now a tale of triumph and renewal, a narrative of my own making. With Alex by my side and a future unburdened by the past stretching out before us, I knew that anything was possible. The pain and turmoil that had once defined my existence were now just echoes, faint reminders of how far I had come. This was my new dawn, my chance to live a life defined not by what I had endured, but by what I had overcome. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I knew that I was finally home.